the Chargers are going to have a lot of decisions to make as far as their free agents coming up this spring. Some players are a must to bring back, some others are questionable, and some others I want no part of. So in this episode, we're going to go through the current list of Chargers free agents and discuss if the team should bring them back next year or let them find work elsewhere. Also in this episode, I'm going to touch on the current state of the offensive coordinator search, who the Chargers have already interviewed, who's on the dock for them to interview, and who I hope they will interview here in the near future. Also, before I go any further, check out my mini-me. Kristen of Yeti or Not had made me a custom version of myself that will be accompanying me in all of my episodes going forward. So I thought this was really cool. A lot of cool detail. One of my professional headshots I have has the Justin Herbert jersey on, my Chargers headband that I wear. And then on the back of here, instead of Herbert, it says Electric Edge on the back of the Yeti. So really cool, super awesome. She did a great job. So if you're looking for a gift for someone who's a Chargers fan or any sports fan in particular, reach out to Kristen. Her handles on Instagram and X, I believe, is at Yeti or Not. So thank you again, Kristen. Super cool. And my mini-me is going to be accompanying me on all episodes going forward. So, all right. So with that being said, if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe to Like Judge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also follow me on socials. I'm at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. So this list of Chargers free agents is pretty long. So we got a lot to go through in this episode. So let's get started. The Chargers have 27 players that are slated to become free agents this offseason. The 2026 new league begins March 11th at 1 p.m. PST, which marks the start of free agency. So the Chargers have a long list of unrestricted free agents. They have some restricted free agents, and they also have exclusive rights free agents. So we're going to start off with the unrestricted free agents and go through this list and talk about why the Chargers should or shouldn't bring these players back. So the first one on the list is Keenan Allen. Now, I'm a bit torn between keeping Keenan and bringing him back. Keenan Allen had a great year. Finished second on the Chargers in receiving yards. His numbers were pretty good for what they got him for. I mean, he was on basically a veteran minimum deal and had some incentives this year. So let's pull up his PFF grades from this season. So overall this year, PFF has him graded at 77.6. Much improved year compared to last year in Chicago. Better than his year in 2021 with the Chargers. So, and here's the discussion that I've heard that he's taken away targeting snaps for Ladd McConkey. So I want to touch on why I don't believe that is extremely accurate. So here is Ladd McConkey's receiving ranks this year. He had 102 targets this year and 66 receptions. Okay, so let's switch back to 2024. Targets 110, receptions 82. So he's had a drop in receptions this year and basically the same amount of targets. I mean, he had 8 less targets this year. I understand the sentiment of, yes, he needs to be your number one guy. But, Keenan was very productive. It was 3rd and Keenan, 4th and Keenan. He's that reliable target that Justin Herbert goes to. I think there's a way you can keep him around and keep everyone happy. One, you're going to get a new offensive coordinator, which is going to change the game plan and hopefully distribute the ball and get more easy buttons going for Justin Herbert in this offense. I think the Chargers bring Keenan Allen back if they don't see an improvement in some of the young wide receivers they have, like Keandre Lambert-Smith. I think Trey Harris made a big step this year, so I see him making that next step into this offense and in his career. The only other way I see them re-signing Keenan Allen is injuries. If someone gets hurt in training camp, they need a veteran guy, they call back Keenan Allen. Like I said, I think he's had a productive year, but there's just a lot of wide receivers in that room, and I know they're trying to get younger. They drafted 2 wide receivers last year. Who knows what they're going to get in the draft this year? I don't think they're going to take another wide receiver, but you never know. I just think that there's a lot of weapons now for Justin Herbert, and in a sense, Keenan Allen may be the odd man out because he is older, he's a vet, and they're looking to get younger on the offense. So, but with that being said, his numbers were great this year. Coming back from Chicago, he was that reliable guy for the Chargers offense. So I think this one is a coin flip either way. I think it's just going to depend on the circumstances as to what the Chargers do in free agency, what they do in the draft, what that wide receiver room looks like, what development they see from some of these younger guys. I think it's a coin flip, but if I were a betting person, I'm going to say that the Chargers are going to move on from Keenan Allen and stick with their core young wide receivers that they've drafted and they're developing. So he had a great year though. It was good to see him back in a Chargers uniform, but I think the Chargers do move on from him this free agency period. All right, next one on the list is Tyler Conklin. Don't want anything to do with him. He doesn't be gone. Deshaun Hand. So let's pull up Deshaun Hand because Deshaun Hand had a very good year for the Chargers. He's another one of those under the radar signings for the Chargers on free agency. I remember the Chargers signing, like, who the hell is Deshaun Hand? So let's pull up his numbers. So overall, they have him graded as a 58.6, which is just under the average threshold of 60. He did miss some time this year. I mean, he missed 5 weeks from that Washington game, which was his best game of the year, and then came back during the Pittsburgh game. So he did deal with some injuries this year. But we did see the defense improve once he came back. With the exception of that Jacksonville game, the defense played well out of that stretch. So I think this is a guy that the Chargers do bring back on a team-friendly deal. And I know that his brother has been very vocal on X saying that Deshaun wants to come back and play for the Chargers. So I think the Chargers do get a deal done and bring him back next year to be another one of those big guys on that D-line. Next up, Najee Harris. It's unfortunate Najee blew out his Achilles. I think the Chargers move on from him. Don't know what kind of running back you're going to get anyway, coming off an Achilles injury. Sucks that it happened to him. I mean, the guy was extremely durable in Pittsburgh. Never missed a game. Comes to the Chargers 3 games in and for the year. Sucks, but I think the Chargers do move on. You know, Kamani Vidal proved his worth this year. Marion Hampton's the real deal. And I'm assuming they're going to look for some low-level guys in free agency to sign to bolster that running back room. Josh Harris must have. We saw a difference between when Rick Lovato played for the Chargers and Josh Harris. Josh Harris is a captain on that team. He's a leader in that special teams room. Must have back. So long snappers typically don't require a lot of money, so this will be an easy team deal to get done. Bobby Hart is next on the list. Bobby Hart is an interesting one to me. So let's pull up Bobby Hart in PFF. All right, so Bobby Hart hadn't played in the NFL since 2022, literally coming off the couch to fill in for the Chargers. I thought for what he was, he played okay. Right? Dude coming off the couch, can't expect too much, but he held his own there with all the injuries, except for the game where they moved him to left tackle, which still will never understand that move. They're 2 different positions. But he played okay this year. I mean, his final grading was a 50.2. Not his worst season of his career. Definitely not his best. I think the only way the Chargers bring Bobby Hart back is if they cannot find any depth elsewhere. I do not think that's going to be the case, but I think this is a situation where the Chargers move on from him. Thank you for your service to us filling in with all these injuries, but the Chargers need to look for other depth pieces at the tackle position in free agency if they really are serious about making a run and getting this Charger team to a Super Bowl. Right, next on the list, Hassan Haskins. I know Hassan Haskins is a hardball guy, played at Michigan, special teams guy, good blocking running back. I think the Chargers move on from him. Injured a lot this year, didn't really play too much. The one game I can think of where he had an impact was that Miami game, setting up one of those blocks for Ladd McConkey to go down the field. But other than that, I think the Chargers do move on from him and find, like I said, they're going to find other pieces to bolster that running back room next season. Andre James, a guy that was talked about a lot. I talked about him a lot. I think they move on from him as well. He wasn't good enough, according to this coaching staff, to beat Bradley Bozen out, and Bradley Bozen was 41st out of 41 centers in the league. So I think they cut their ties there, move on from Andre James. And what I think is going to happen is the Chargers are going to sign a big free agent like Tyler Lindenbaum, and then Bradley Bozen becomes that backup. That's my guess. That's what I think is going to happen, but we'll see as free agency plays out and also the draft as well as to what the Chargers decide to do with that interior offensive line. Next up, Tony Jefferson. Now, Tony Jefferson is a fan favorite, played very well this year. To think that this guy started, he didn't even make the active roster out of the preseason, and he played very well. I mean, his best game this year was against the Raiders in Week 13. His overall grade for this year was a 70.3. Definitely one of his better years. His best year of his career, according to PFF, says last year. Didn't play nearly as many snaps, so take that with a grain of salt. Before that, his best year was in 2016 with Arizona. But I think this is a guy you definitely bring back. He's a fan favorite. He wants to play for the Chargers. He played very well, veteran presence. Think of some of the impact plays he made this year. I mean, that game against the Chiefs, he was knocking guys all over the field. That Eagles game, that game-winning pick, it's a guy you definitely need to bring back. Have some depth in the safety position. Also, you got that veteran presence and a guy that wants to be here and he wants to be a Charger and he wants to win as a Charger. So I think you get a team-friendly deal done with him and you keep him around for next season. All right, next up on this list is Zion Johnson. Now, this is another interesting one for me because Zion Johnson, you can't say he's a great guard by any stretch of the imagination, just had an average year. Now, you can make the argument, well, the offensive line was extremely banged up. Alt's gone, Slater's gone, which hurts. I get that. This year, he had one game over 70 according to PFF. I mean, his grade this year was 57.4. The one thing I will say about Zion Johnson is he's extremely durable and he never gets hurt. I mean, look at the last 4 seasons. 84, 1006, 1046, 1071. He's durable. I'm going to knock on wood because I'm going to say this and I'm going to jinx him. The guy hasn't gotten hurt for the most part. So he's only had an ankle injury in late 2024 and then a neck issue in 2023. Other than that, he's been extremely durable. I know the coaching staff loves him. I know Harbaugh praises him. I know he thinks he's extremely intelligent. He works really hard. The Chargers have put out a video too of what happens post-game and then leading into practice, and he filmed that and he went through his post-game routine and then what he does to get ready for practice and all the stretching he does to stay limber and stay mobile and stay healthy. I think the Chargers bring him back if it's a somewhat team-friendly deal. I've heard numbers where he's going to want about $17 million a year. I don't think he's worth $17 million a year. I say between that $10 and $12 million range. You bring him back, you keep him on that line. But I think you can get better in free agency, and I also think you can get better in the draft as well. But I think you bring Zion back if the numbers make sense to do so. But, I will give the guy props. He's durable. He sure is durable. Him and Bozeman this year have been the two guys that haven't been hurt at all this year. So I'll give them props there. But I think the Chargers shouldn't be all in on signing him. I think they need to evaluate their other options of free agency and also in the draft to fix this interior offensive line. Okay, next up, Trey Lance. I think the Chargers move on from Trey Lance. Didn't really show you too much in his start against Denver. They have DJU as their third string quarterback, which they've kept around, and I think Harbaugh likes him and is developing him. So maybe he becomes QB2 next year, or they look for other options, whether it's in the draft or in free agency or post-draft. They sign an undrafted rookie free agent. But I think they move on from Trey Lance and save the couple $1 million that he wants. Dean Leonard, another guy I want back. He's a great special teams player. The Chargers traded Jasir Taylor to the Jets because they knew Dean Leonard was coming back off injury. I think it's someone that the Chargers are going to keep around, that they want to keep around. And I would. He's going to be cheap. He's great on special teams. He can play in that secondary. I think it's a no-brainer to sign him to a team-friendly deal. Now, here's a player that a lot of people are emotionally attached to, but we're going to talk about why I think it's time to move on from Khalil Mack. Now, let's talk about Khalil Mack's season. This year, he graded at an 83. Last year with the Chargers, he was a 90.4, and in 2023, 91.8. I mean, he's had a great career here, but here's the problem. He got $18 million last year from the Chargers. And 2023 he had 18 sacks. Last year he had 7 sacks. This year he had 6 sacks. Granted, he missed some time. But if we pull up where he ranks this year as far as edge rushers in the league. Forced fumbles, he's ranked 4th with 3. Everything else is, nothing above the 40s, right? 6 sacks, he's 45th. Hurries, 42nd. Hits, 62nd. Total pressures, 50th. Didn't have any batted passes. Solo tackles, 68th. Assists, 79th. Stops, 36. So here's my take on Khalil Mack. I think the Chargers can get better on the edge. They got to pay some guys too, remember. They're going to have to pay Oweh, which we're going to talk about. Thule is up for an extension. They're probably going to look for some other guys in free agency. Also, I think Khalil Mack is going to retire. In his postseason press conference, he had his locker, was non-committal on the issue. But Derwin James had made a post about end of the season. There was a video of Derwin James lifting a 170-pound dumbbell with Khalil Mack, and he made a comment like, "I'm gonna miss you." I think Khalil Mack is 34, gonna be turning 35. He's played 12 seasons in the NFL. I think he's going to retire this year and move on, and the Chargers won't have to make that decision whether to re-sign him or let him go elsewhere. But I just don't think if the Chargers did have a chance to re-sign him, he's worth $18 million at this point in his career. Like I said, they need to spend money elsewhere. This year they can get younger on that defensive line, and the big takeaway here is they got to spend money to fix this interior offensive line to keep Justin Herbert upright. And signing Khalil Mack to an $18-20 million deal for 1 year, just it doesn't make sense to me. And I know he's loved by the fans. I think he's a great Charger. I just think that it's time for the Chargers to move on from him. You got Oweh in that trade. That's the guy you need to pay. Tooley, you got to pay him. And like I said, there's some other edge rushers that are going to be available for a bargain. And we know Joe Ortiz makes some good deals in free agency to sign players where their value's low. They bring them in. The coaching really elevates them and has some of these players perform at a very high level. I mean, you look at last year, Dante Jackson. No one knew who Dante Jackson was, playing at elite level. Ben St. Juste, who's on this list, we'll talk about. He's played at a high level. Deshaun Hand, another one. Last year, Poona Ford. The list goes on and on. So I think it's time for the Chargers to move on from Khalil Mack. Hopefully he retires and goes off into the sunset. Been a great Charger. I just think the Chargers do need to get younger and reallocate some of that money elsewhere. Tito Ogbonnia, I think it's time to move on from him. He was hurt this year as well. Let's pull up his numbers real quick. Just a very below average interior defensive lineman. In his career numbers, he hasn't been anything over 60 grade, which is average. So I think the Chargers can do better and will do better, and I think they'll move on from Ogbonnia in the offseason. Odafe Oweh. Give Odafe Oweh a blank check. The trade to get him was a phenomenal trade. Coming over, he had no sacks, finished the season with 8 sacks, had 3 sacks in that Patriots playoff game. I think it's a no-brainer here. Sign him to what he wants. You have an elite edge rusher. Plus, he is super athletic. I've seen in the Denver game, week 18, and also in the game against the Texans, him drop into coverage and cover a running back. Give him the bag. Fantastic trade by Joe Ortiz to get him. Great edge rusher. He filled that void. We don't have to go through numbers. I think he earned his spot and he earned his contract that he's going to get in this offseason from the Chargers. So don't let him leave. Trevor Penning. I think the Chargers should keep Trevor Penning. He's not going to be your starter, but he's going to give you some depth. And I've talked about the Chargers need depth on this offensive line. He can play the tackle position. He can play the guard position. I mean, I wouldn't play him at tackle, but he has experience playing tackle positions and guard. He's played that 6th offensive line position last year or this past season, which I thought he's done very well. He's very physical. He's going to be a cheap option for the Chargers. So I think you give him a deal, keep him around as your 6th offensive lineman or just creating some depth within that offensive line room. All right, next up, we got Denzel Perryman. Now, let's pull up Denzel Perryman's numbers. Now, Denzel Perryman was hurt. He's gotten suspended this year. He's a great run defender, great tackler, not so great in coverage. This year, they have his overall grade at 56.1. Last year with the Chargers, it was 60.8. I think the Chargers do move on from Denzel Perryman. I think they're going to try and get younger in that linebacking core. I mean, you got Henley, you got Troy Dye. Surprisingly enough, Junior Colson should be back. I don't know what you're going to get out of him. He's been abysmal. But I think the Chargers do move on from Denzel Perryman. And let's just pull real quick the depth right now the Chargers have at linebacker. Yep. So they have Dayon. They have Denzel. Elshon is 2nd string. Troy Dye. And then Marlo Wax. Marlo Wax played well when he got his opportunities. So that may be someone that gets elevated next year for the Chargers. But I think they move on from Denzel Perryman. I know they like his leadership, but I think it's time to move on and find someone who can do a little better in coverage and just get overall younger. So I think the Chargers do move on from Denzel Perryman this year. Delshon Phillips, sign him up. Great year, 2nd team All-Pro on special teams. Not even a question for me to re-sign him. Special teams. Right, so Delshon, real quick, his season grades. He graded at 83. I mean, the Vegas game, he graded at 90. I mean, he had a great run down the stretch here. I think it's a no-brainer that you re-sign him. I don't think he's going to require a lot of money. sign him to a team-friendly deal, and he's a solid piece for the special teams units. I definitely think you should keep him around. Trey Pipkins. I think it's time to move on from Trey Pipkins. I think he made $9 million this year. He's been on this team for, let's see, Trey. I mean, he's been on the team since 2019. His numbers are below average. I mean, he's had 3 seasons where he's been above a 60 grading according to PFF. I mean, he had a rough year. He wasn't even supposed to be a starter this year, but with all the injuries, he got re-elevated back to that starting right tackle position. I think it's time to cut your losses with him. It's lucky for the Chargers they did keep him around last year because he was needed. But like I said, I think that whole offensive line room needs to get revamped with the exception of Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. And I think this is one piece to move on from and find some other depth in that tackle position going into next year. Next up, we got Jamari Salyer. I think you re-signed Salyer. He's one of your depth guys for sure. When he wasn't hurt this year and he played left tackle, he played very well at left tackle. The game against Jacksonville was graded 75. The game against Philly graded 76. In that Dallas game, he got hurt, but grade this year overall was a 62.2. And, some of these grades, if you look at his worst games, right guard, graded bad, right tackle, okay. And then once he got switched to left tackle, which I had talked about on many episodes, that when Slater went down a couple years ago, Salyer filled in and played very well at left tackle. So I think this is a guy that's not going to require a lot of money. You keep him around as a depth piece. And now you have a solid backup left tackle if, God forbid, you need him again next year. So I say this is a no-brainer to keep Jamari Salyer around heading into next season. Ben St-Juste. Ben St-Juste is an interesting one for me because I'd gone on a Commanders podcast when the Chargers played the Commanders, and all I heard from the Commander fans was how bad Ben St-Juste was. I'm like, he's not playing too bad this year. And if you look at his numbers, he's played great. I mean, his 4 years in Washington were bad, and I understand why. They felt that way. This year, he graded out as a 77 for the Chargers. Now, once again, that's a testament to Jesse Minter's coaching and all the other coaching staff that have really made him flourish this year for the Chargers. So I think this is an easy signing for me. Gets him to a 1 or 2 year deal, team friendly, another depth piece in that secondary who's played well. And, fingers crossed Jesse Minter doesn't leave for greener pastures. But even if he does, I think they may promote from within and they keep that same kind of defense going forward, which he's thrived on this year. So I think this is a no-brainer for me to keep Ben St-Juste around heading into next season. All right. And we have another fan favorite, Teair Tart. Now, I know the big conversation is don't do the same thing you did to Poona Ford to let him walk out the building and sign with the Rams. Teair Tart had a great year. I mean, he's made some notable plays. Everyone remembers week 1, the slap herd around the world. I think the Chargers need to lock him up. Look at the first 5 games of the season, played phenomenal. He graded a 93 in that Washington game. But overall this year, 67.9. Grade a little bit lower than last year, but he had a lot more snaps this year. So I think the Chargers can get something done with him. I think another somewhat team-friendly deal. Keep him around and just don't make the same mistake you did with Poona Ford letting him walk out the building. You need those big guys in the interior. You have Tart, you have Caldwell, Deshaun Hand. Maybe 1 or 2 more pieces are added to that defensive line like I had talked about. But this is a guy that I think the Chargers should definitely keep around heading into next year. All right, some restricted free agents. So just so you're aware, so player with 3 accrued seasons and expired contract, restricted free agents are free to negotiate and sign with any team, but their original team can offer them one of the various qualifying offers or tenders that come with the right of a first refusal or draft pick compensation. So the Chargers have 2. They have Tucker Fisk and Austin Deculus. I wouldn't care either way if Austin Deculus walked out of the building. Was not a good trade for the Chargers. I know they needed some depth, but he's just been bad. I mean, his final grade, Deculus, this year was a 36.5. I think it's okay to move on from Deculus. Tucker Fisk. Tucker Fisk is a great blocking tight end. I think you try to make something work with him, keep him around. I think the Chargers are going to move on from Will Dissly. I mean, his grade this year was a 47.1. He was hurt, but it also depends on what offensive coordinator's coming in as well and how they're going to use their tight ends. Bolt fam, want to get in on the action on game day? PrizePicks is the easiest way to play fantasy style picks. No leagues, no drafts. Just pick more or less on your favorite player stats and you're live. New users get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 using code ELECEDGE, ELECEDGE. Quick, fun, and perfect for game day. Sign up today with PrizePicks. I think if you can, you keep Fisk around. If not, so be it. And then let's talk about exclusive rights free agents. So this means any player fewer than 3 accrued seasons and an expired contract. If his original team offers him a 1-year contract at the league minimum based on his credited seasons, the player cannot negotiate with other teams. So with these 3 right here, I think for every single one, the Chargers do offer a contract. I think Jared Patterson came in this year on and off the practice squad. The times he got opportunities, he ran very hard. I like him, so I hope that the Chargers get him on a league minimum. Kimani Vidal proved his worth this year, filling in for Hampton when he went down. So he's definitely going to get locked up. And then Kendall Williamson, he graded this year for the Chargers at a 73.4. Not too many games playing on defense. However, he's also versatile in special teams. He graded at a 55 in special teams. So I would be okay that the Chargers do keep him around as well. So Joe Ortiz and this front office is going to have some decisions to make. Big takeaway for me is keep the players that are core to getting this team to Super Bowl. You know, players like Odafe Owe, Josh Harris, Deshaun Hand, Tony Jefferson. Those guys need to be locked up. Tier Tar, Ben St. Juste that I talked about. Those guys need to get locked up, and then we'll see what Ortiz can cook up once the free agency period does open here in March. Now, I do want to touch on, before we end this episode, the current offensive coordinator search for the Chargers. I put out an episode last week talking about my ideal picks for that job. Now, we're going to go through who the Chargers have interviewed so far. They did interview Brian Callahan, who was the former coach of the Titans, who got fired midseason. They interviewed Shane Day, who is the Chargers quarterback coach. So that was an internal interview. And then Marcus Brady, who is the pass game coordinator for the Chargers, he also got an interview. Some of the other notes that I've seen around X so far is that this week the Chargers are supposed to interview Mike McDaniel, supposed to interview Brian Dable. I know they requested an interview for Arthur Smith. They requested an interview for Thomas Brown, who's the pass game coordinator out of the Patriots. And then we'll see also, who else comes on the docket this week. The Bills fired Sean McDermott. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers called Joe Brady in for an interview for OC. So we will see how this interview cycle plays out. I do appreciate that the Chargers are sticking to their word and really casting a wide net for this coaching search. I think it's warranted. You just can't be stuck on the Greg Roman way of operating an offense. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of head coaching positions still out there open. I think, like I said, I think some of the big names still, like Mike McDaniel and Brian Dable, are going to find head coaching gigs elsewhere. But that remains to be seen at this point. So as the news develops, I'll put out more content to talk about those moves. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Electric Edge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also follow me on socials. I'm at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. So Charger fans, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What Chargers free agents should stay? Which ones should the Chargers let go? And then also let me know your thoughts on the current offensive coordinator search for the Chargers. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Electric Edge Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom. And as always, go Chargers and bolt up.